Hi, I'm Jess from Jess McClellan Designs. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put together the most basic Procreate video there probably is out there. So you're going to start by creating a new canvas, and when you do that, you will have the option to create your own size, which I like to do. You will see once you create something that it's at the bottom, but I'm going to go ahead and do that with you. So we're going to do a 10 by 10 inch canvas, and that's just because that is going to be big enough to really be transferred to anything without any issues. So once you do that, you're going to get your canvas open, and you're going to see that you have a white background, which can be changed to any color or can be removed. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to keep it white just so we can see what we're doing. So here we're in our first layer, and typically when I start with a design, I like to start with black, and that's just just preference. I usually will do an outline, and then you can change things later if you want. And then the pen that I like to start with, you're going to see is my studio pen, which is inking. And here you'll see all of your different brushes. Really, again, personal preference, but I like to start with studio pen. You can of course start with whatever you'd like, but it's my go-to. On the left-hand side of your screen, you're going to see that you can change the size of your brush, so the size of your point, and then you can also change the opacity. And one important thing to note is that if you plan on doing, like color fills, which I do a lot, you want to keep your opacity up. And the reason is because if you create something, like here we've got a circle, and you want to fill it, but you're using an opaque pen, it's going to count it as like having openings, so it's not going to fill. However, if you use a completely solid pen, it's going to be able to fill up for you. So if you are going to be using fills, you want to keep that opacity open. So let's go ahead and begin. We are going to just do a really simple candy heart image today, just because it kind of goes over some basics. We kind of see a couple of the different tools, and yeah, so let's go ahead and begin. We're going to start in layer 1. And I'm going to do 1/2 of the heart. Now you'll see that if you hold down your pen after writing something, it kind of like automatically fixes itself. And so that's how you get some of those really smooth lines. And because a heart can sometimes be difficult to do evenly, I'm just going to leave one side. I'm going to duplicate this side. And you can see that by just a swipe of my layer, I'm able to duplicate, and then I'm going to flip it. Now at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that I just flipped it horizontally. And I'm just doing some rotation here to get those points kind of met. And if you want to change, different sides, you do have to go to that layer to be able to move that piece. And I'm just selecting it with the little arrow selection tool at the top of the screen. So once you get to a point where you are comfortable with it and you feel like everything looks good, you can go ahead, and I'm going to actually merge these two layers, making this one heart that I can more easily move around and adjust, without having the two separate sides. And so now we're going to go ahead and duplicate this heart. And you'll see at the bottom of the screen, when we go ahead and resize, you have a couple different options at the bottom. So you've got freeform, uniform, distort, and warp. Now you'll see when I resize with uniform, it kind of doesn't really give the effect that I want with the candy heart. It just makes the whole thing bigger. So what I'm going to do is take freeform, and freeform is going to allow me to just apply the changing to like certain areas and pull certain sides, which I really like. So again, this is completely dependent on what you're doing. Sometimes uniform is what you need, sometimes freeform is what you need. Distort and warp are a little different. We can go over those another time. So you can kind of play around with this till you get it to where you want. You'll see that when you are in Procreate, so you are of course using your pen or your finger, but if you tap on a certain side, like if you tap up or down, or to the right or to the left of an image, it will just sort of nudge your image. Sometimes it can be hard to actually pull and drag just a tiny bit, but if you just do little taps, which you can see I'm doing here a little bit, you can just like move it a teeny tiny bit. And then of course, if you get to a point where you're just having a hard time filling some spaces, you can just leave it, and then you can also fill that in with your pen as well. Personal preference, not a huge deal. I'm not going to stress too much about it, but you just kind of want to get it to where you want it to be. So we're at a pretty good spot, and I'm just going to go ahead and create a new layer. So layers are your best friend in Procreate. They make it so that you can fix one thing without ruining anything else. You can do shading, all that good stuff. So I'm just going to create this little line here to give us this 3-dimensional effect of the heart. And then that's it there. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start coloring. So we need to take a look at our layers, and depending on what layer's on top, what layer's on the bottom, that's going to kind of, affect our coloring. So I'm going to go with the pink, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to color drop. To color drop, you simply put your finger on the color circle and just drag it. So once you get that color that you want, you just pull it, fills it up. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change the color of the other heart. Remember, we have two hearts, they're two different layers. One is sort of like slid down to the other. Now, you'll see that I forgot to change my layer, so you want to make sure you change your layer. And you'll see that that heart that I just colored ended up being there's open space, so it went on top. So we just want to move those, and then there you go. We have the color that we went on the top, the color that we went on the bottom. Now I'm going to go ahead and do some shading, and I'm going to start with shading the bottom heart, that darker color. So what you want to do is create a layer just above that, and you do that just by clicking the plus sign. And then once you have that layer, we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit clipping mask, and clipping mask is going to make it so that anything that we draw on this layer 4 is only going to be shown on that space of that darker color heart. So you can color all over this screen, all over this canvas. You're not going to see it unless it's over that spot. So it just kind of makes for shading and things like that easier. It can be hard, excuse me, hard to shade in just one place, especially if you're using a bigger brush. So you'll see that if you look at the layer, it's a lot bigger than what you see, but it's only showing what's on that. So clipping mask is really awesome. Now we're going to go ahead into the heart above. Same thing, create a new layer, and then you're going to go ahead and hit clipping mask. This is so that everything we do on this heart is only going to stay on this heart. You're not going to get anything in that outside space or anything in the space below. And I'm just creating some, some texture and dimension here. You can go ahead and use airbrush for that. You can use a lot of different things. And then I'm using that smudge tool. So you'll see the smudge is that little finger. And one thing that's important to note is that the paintbrush, the brush that you're using, the smudge tool, and the eraser all have their own brush. The great thing about that is that you can match them up so that if you're erasing or you're smudging, you're using the same thing that you originally drew with, and that's just going to make things look more even. So if you want to keep them the same, you can just, easily click on it and change it. So here I'm just going to do some smudging, making things, trying to add some color and some shadows and things like that. You see I'm just putting those darker colors at the top, and then I'm going to go ahead and smudge those in. And then again, this is what that clipping mask is really great for. Everything that I'm doing, like if I wasn't using clipping mask, my smudges would go off of those lines, but instead they're not. So now I'm just going to go ahead and add some text, because this is in fact a candy heart, and we know that we can't have a candy heart without some text, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and click love. Now when you want to change your font, you simply just double click, select all, and then click on that text. Here you have all of your text, and you can also import fonts, which we can go over another day. But you can underline, you can make your font sort of like bubble letters so that you can fill them in. There's lots of things that you can do here. You can adjust the tracking and things like that. I'm going to go ahead and change this to bubble letters, and I'm going to change it to frontage font just because I like it, and then I'm just going to bring those letters a little bit closer together. Once you like what you have, you can go ahead and click done, and then you can go ahead and move your font around your image until you get to a place that you want. And I'm just going to center this a little bit, and I'm going to change the inside of this font white. Now you can change the outline if you wanted to as well, and you'll see, whoop, accidentally did that there. Just undo that. You can zoom in closer so that it makes it a little bit easier. The great thing is that you can zoom in and out on Procreate without anything changing. So there you've got excuse me, you have your text on the front. Of course, you could have done the outline as well. You could have done the outline in a different color. You could have done, you can do so many things with this. But I'm going to just keep this, pretty basic and leave it at that. You could bring these layers together if you wanted to. If you wanted to recreate this, you could duplicate this and just change the colors on the inside. So there's a lot of fun things you can do. This was, again, very basic. I just wanted to sort of, show the use of layering, being able to make something bigger and smaller and moving it down to change those dimensions, shadowing, and using that clipping mask, which is really a pretty great feature. Again, I didn't really go into too much of how it, you use it, and some of the really great things that it can be used for, but just kind of a general thing. And then here is just a quick time-lapse replay. I hope that you found this helpful. Be sure to subscribe and like if you'd like to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching.